Fiddler talk is titled Transforming Fiddler on the Roof to Fiddler auf dem Dach, and we've got a wonderful panel lined up for tonight. We have our musical director and NYTF artistic director Zalman Lotek. We have our choreographer who did the musical staging for this production as well, Stash Kmiec. We have our esteemed director, Tony, and Oscar-winning actor and director, Joel Gray. Our moderator for this evening is broadcast journalist Bud Mishkin. You've probably seen him over his 25 years with New York One. Please welcome Joel Gray.
I have always adored Fiddler on the Roof, and I somehow felt that even though I didn't speak Yiddish, I knew what this play was about. I'd seen so many performances of it and adored it and admired it. And I spoke to Hal Prince, who is a good friend, and he said he was going to call Zalman and tell him that I should direct it. And that all happened in like 20 hours. And we started to talk about how to do it. And he's the motor. He's the man who makes everything happen here. And
you didn't grow up, you didn't speak Yiddish, but you grew up around Yiddish being part of the funny songs of your father.
There was no Yiddish spoken in my home.
So the fact that your dad had sung...
My father was very fluent and he loved Yiddish. My mother had no interest in it at all. And it was never spoken in our house, except those occasional times when they didn't want us to understand. That's so classic, right? But my dad adored Yiddish, and he came from a family that did in fact speak it, and the Yiddish music was something that I heard from, very, very early on. My dad was a great clarinet and saxophone player, legitimate, and played classical music, and always at any sort of mitzvah or wonderful moment in celebration, my dad would always pull out his clarinet and make the most magical Yiddish klezmer music. I mean, he was a great, great player, and I loved it when he did. And the next thing I knew is I grew up and did not want to play a piano, did not want to play any instrument, but I saw a theater performance of children, and I thought to myself, and I said to my mother, I want to do that. And so at age 9, I was already a devoted, committed actor, not a singer, not a dancer. And the theater was my dream, and it still is. And somehow, acting in all the things that I've done over these years, this was so natural for me. Because of my dad, probably, and the love of him and his passion and his pride in being an outspoken Jew.
Now, when you grew up completely immersed in it, your dad worked at the Forward, Workman's Circle, your mom was involved in publishing, so is there a point, you went to Juilliard years ago, is there a point early on where you thought the language these characters in Fiddler on the Roof would have been speaking would have been Yiddish, there should be a show, and it should be in New York?
Well, I have to say that the the impetus for the Yiddish production here was the Israeli production. My parents, they called my father the address for Yiddish in America, because anything that was going on with Yiddish, he was involved with on some level. So he received the recording that was made in Israel in 65, 65 or 66, 65, and we heard the Shmuel Rudensky's recording of Tevye and Fiddler, and it was then that we had already loved Fiddler for a year, having heard it in 64. Now to hear it in Yiddish was very exciting. So it has been in the recesses of my mind for many years to be able to do it. But it's because of my partner and CEO, Chris Massimine, who undertook this massive production that we're massive production. No, I just need, when you say I'm the motor here, I appreciate it, but there's a team of people, that not only the staff of the theater, but the museum that have made this production happen. So.
Stash, you are considered the foremost American authority on Polish culture and dance. Your folks are Polish immigrants. And you have background in Fiddler on the Roof as well.
Yes.
So when you initially come to the show, when was that? And the fact that you were steeped in kind of Polish culture and Polish dance, did that help you initially as far as the first time you were connected to the show, and then when you're brought on for this show?
Okay, so you want to talk about this show in particular, yes?
I gave you a lot there.
Yeah, you gave me a lot.
Let's go chronologically. What was your first connection to Fiddler on the Roof?
The first connection is when I did a national tour with Theodore Bickel. It was a...
Heard of him?
Yeah.
Heard of him?
I did... Oh, thank you for years. 1994. So I did a two-year tour then, and then I did another 2-year tour with him in 2000. And then 6 other subsequent productions, and I have a lot of Fiddler mileage as far as a performer. And then after that, I also directed and choreographed it several times. And so I came with all of that knowledge of the Robbins original. And coming to this production, when I met with Joel and Zalman early on, they wanted something a little bit different, and it wasn't just the Yiddish, it was other aspects of it, really a concentration on realism. And this was a real village. Even though Robbins did that to an extent, this is going to be even further into the concept of realism. So with one foot in tradition and one foot in realism, I approached it in ways of embellishing, adding layers onto the Robbins, and taking my background not only in Polish dance and culture, but also in various aspects of Jewish tradition, and infusing more of that into the production, and to add those layers of the traditional customs, even though a lot of that is already in the musical, adding even further layers onto it.
So for some of us, we might look at it all as, be it Russian, be it Ukrainian, be it Polish, as all Slavic.
Yes.
But are there delineations? So the knowledge of the Polish culture and the Polish dance, would it pertain to something like this, which is taking place in Ukraine, in the late 19th century, or are those apples and oranges?
They're not exactly apples and oranges, but in addition to the Polish background, I have a background in Hungarian, Russian, Ukrainian, Belarusian dance, and all that. So I do know the differences. And also, as we talked about earlier, the boundaries of Poland, were in constant flux. And so, what was Poland one day, maybe Ukraine the next, or whatever. And there were 2 areas of Poland that I did a lot of research, which was Helm. You might have heard of, yes. There is actually a place. And I went around to villagers, people, inhabitants, and with a camcorder and a tape recorder, and I recorded all of this so I could document it and then present it as a suite of songs and dances from that area. There's another area. So anyway, so it's all of that. I think my thirst for knowledge, you know, when I was in Poland studying at a university ethnography and folk dance and folklore, I made it a point to travel to a synagogue to find out more, because during communist Poland, there wasn't a lot of that information coming out. So
not an easy question also to ask at the Chamber of Commerce either. Where's the local synagogue? Yeah.
So I did find out a lot, and also I had instructors that I picked their brains and found out even more. So it's that constant thirst for knowledge applied to my love and knowledge of Fiddler that I was able to, as I said, one foot in tradition, one foot in the realism of our concept.
When Stas was talking about the notion of boundaries changing, I told him the story earlier that my grandfather on my father's side was a Polish immigrant from Suwałki, Poland, way up in the northeast corner, came here by himself. Family all stayed behind, letters through the 20s and the 30s, and then 1939. The letters stopped. But years later, as his grandson, I would ask him, Grandpa, you say you're from Poland, you say you're from Russia. You know, which was it? I was from upstate New York. It didn't change. New York, New Jersey. What did I know? And I'd say, you say you're from Poland, you say you're from Russia. Which was it? He said, sometimes it was Poland, sometimes it was Russia. And the punchline was always, didn't matter. They all hated us. His positive outlook on the world. As you're preparing this, or as you make the phone call to Joel, and the initial stages, is there a notion of what you thought the biggest trap might be, or the biggest hurdle to overcome in staging Fiddler on the Roof in Yiddish?
In Yiddish. We knew that we were dealing with one of the most beloved musicals written in America. We knew that it was one of the most successful musicals. But the challenge of conveying the story honestly from actors who didn't necessarily know Yiddish was the biggest challenge. I knew that when our casting director, Jamie Beth Margulis, put the ad out, she received over 2,500 inquiries for 26 roles. Then she and her team whittled it down to 700. We saw 700 actors, and these were, of course, most of them, the vast majority, did not know Yiddish, but they were Broadway caliber actors, singer, dancers, fantastic talent. And so when you asked about the greatest challenge, I knew by asking Joel, it would be a theatrically rich and deep presentation. After he then put his incredible team together, the design team, and then they presented us with the concept, we were in tears. We were so moved by his concept of how he was going to transform this stage, this lecture hall, into a stage, into a village. But the actors was the greatest challenge, and I'm just going to fast forward because we're so blessed with the 26 people on our stage. We are as I mentioned many times in articles, 24 of them, really don't speak Yiddish. Several of them have performed with us before. 3 of them are native Yiddish, not native, but have learned Yiddish and speak fluently. But the vast majority learned the Yiddish in the 4 weeks of rehearsal. And yes, it is a wow. And because it's not just learning the Yiddish, it's learning the other text. It's learning what the other person, and the brilliant way that Joel would stage the rehearsals would, he would first have them do the scenes in English so that everyone.
So I'd understand.
And so that
They didn't know what to tell them.
and so the actor knew exactly what was doing, and then Muttel Didner, and Sabina Bruckner, the Yiddish team would then hear the Yiddish, and then we would go through it. So, but it's a tremendous tribute to the actors who, to this day, consciously go over the Yiddish in their heads before they come out, and that's why it's so believable. So that was the biggest challenge.
Joel's a director, because they've just learned this language, a little bit more leeway in terms of, if an actor drops a line or doesn't know a line by a particular time where you think that actors should know the line, it's a little more cushion as opposed to if they were doing a show in England.
I was never the expert about the Yiddish. They could have been speaking Turkish. But I always had somebody nearby who was very, very aware of the spoken language and that it be spoken correctly. I just thought of something today that made me laugh. It was that this theater has a reputation that if the actors are not speaking good Yiddish, that the audience talks to them. And so, I think that all of our actors are terrified. And it turns out, I have not heard one word back at the actors ever.
No, I saw the show this afternoon and no words back, just laughter. Laughter ahead of the points of the show that are particularly well known, and then other little jewels in the show that are not quite as well known. The whole notion of a great book, to me, it's largely about a rhythm. And of course, growing up in a household where I heard a zillion times, "It's no great honor either." Or, "You had a bad week, why should I suffer?" We weren't even talking about the show. Even as a non-Yiddish speaker, once you start getting into it, is there some sense of, wow, this language in the show really has a rhythm?
It took on a life of its own. That's all I can say. Because I don't know that anybody's ever quite done it this way. And just put the word out. No talking back to the actors. I like to keep them safe.
As a choreographer, look, if you're going to choreograph a chorus line, okay, that's pressure. But then there are, in terms of theater and famous plays, famous musicals, and famous scenes from famous musicals, to life, l'chaim, it's got to be up there. And so when you know that you're going to have a scene that's been seen once or twice by the people in the audience, albeit not in Yiddish, what's that pressure like? When you're going into that and trying to do it justice, but also trying to do something different as well.
Well, I think because I had such an intimate knowledge of Robbins, I was the one that would know how to break the rules, as opposed to, not knowing it at all and just wanting to create something brand new without knowing what the source is. So I knew what it was, and then, as I said earlier, that I was able to embellish, add layers, and put different things in. I put a lot more Russian dancing in, and I'm sure, if any of my dancers are out there, I'm sure they thank me for it every night. Because there's
For the record, there was some talk about maybe the Russian dance will be done during the course of this evening, and I'd just like to say that I will not be performing Russian dance today.
During the auditions, it was a unique type of dancer because I said to them, no amount of training is going to prepare you for what is going to happen to your thighs during your dancing. And I heard that the original production, they were lying out in the hallways like it was a barracks, of wounded soldiers because their legs were bothering that much. And having danced it, I can tell you by that last show of the week, you're definitely feeling those thighs and legs and can't walk downstairs. You can walk upstairs, but you can't walk down. It just kind of gives out. But, so I added much more because I wanted a real heavy dose of all that Russianness. And coming from a folk dance background, I wanted to put more of it in there. But I also knew the points of that it needed to touch. And so, I didn't reinvent the wheel, but I gave it a whole lot of grease.
We now look at it, and you're playing to sold-out audiences every day and every night. As you get into the process, Joel, is there any notion, is this going to fly? Will this happen? Will audiences come? Do you have to deal with the element of doubt? Or were you pretty sure once you got into it that, no, this is going to hit?
Doubt.
Next question. So
it was risky for everybody. I mean,
Use the mic? Oh. To play with a perfect piece in the first place, and then I think that there is certainly anti-Semitism in our world as we live it today, and you wonder whether or not this is something that we should be, in fact, celebrating who we are and where we come from. And will that be accepted in that way? When you look at the world view of the dreadful immigration situation and the European, I mean, it's just horrifying. And I find that we are celebrating Yiddishkeit in this production, and that audiences want it and hold it and are ready at the very beginning of the play when they have you say whatever, Meshuggah. I mean, you're home.
in some of the countries where there were Anatevkas, there does seem to be a drive to kind of go back to the future, and also people are leaving Anatevkas all over the world, still, for a whole variety of reasons. Is that something that you try and get across, or tried to get across to the cast and everybody working on the show, that it's not just a great show, which it is, and it's not just an iconic show, which it is, but there's meaning in our history, and there's meaning right now, as far as people leaving homes for some better land?
I don't think people asked any of those questions. I mean, if they did, it was purely internal. I didn't get any resistance or not even a question about it.
Not so much resistance, but just that the show is a current show and has real meaning and real legs. And like the old, to paraphrase the old advertisement, you don't need to be Jewish to love
I think it was
Fiddler.
so clear from everyone from the first reading, when we first read it, when we first heard the first reading in Yiddish, it was so clear to us all, actors, producer, everyone, how timely and how special it was for us to be doing it today. Yeah, but the natural, and this is really to Joel's credit. This is, you know, when you ask about doubts, okay, I had my own worries as a shtickle producer here, you know, part of, you know, could we present this icon of a musical without the sets and, you know, big dance, big cast and big orchestra, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And when Joel and Beowulf, the set designer, and Peter Kaczorowski, this lighting designer, and Annie Ward, the costume designer, presented us with the first rendering of what this would look like in a little box in Annie's studio, we sat there with tears in our eyes. I mean, I sat there just looking at this and saying, oh my God, what else do we need besides this incredible text, incredible message, and this world that Joel was committed to bring forth in the most honest, in the most natural, as he says, way. And, you know, he did it. They did it. So, you know.
The word iconic has been used several times, and rightfully so, about this show. And yet a show is a lot of work. And so do you have to kind of break through that notion of, okay, we're doing Fiddler in Yiddish, we're doing Fiddler in Yiddish in New York, we're doing Fiddler in Yiddish in New York at the Museum of Jewish Heritage. We have steps we need to learn. You know, for us as an audience, there can be that, boy, how meaningful this is. But did you have to kind of break through it all to the actors like, look, we can focus on the bigger picture at some point. At this point, we need to work on this scene.
There was excitement. There was excitement from all these non-Yiddish speaking actors and non-Jewish actors. Were just totally committed. From the beginning, they had, how many people? 700 that auditioned for something like this? There was a tremendous excitement about it that I don't even know if I can explain.
So I have a bit of a different perspective. I wasn't doubtful. I saw, I think it was maybe the second or third day of rehearsal, I staged Tradition, the opening. And from that point, I knew that this was going to work because we had a village. They were all very individual people, and they were telling a story. And I know when, before everyone else from the creative team saw the designs, Joel brought me to see it first. And I think he was wanting to break it to me because it was not going to be all of, you know, what I'm used to seeing, a house of this. And I saw it, and I took it in, and I said, it's going to challenge me. It's a challenge for me, but I'm ready to meet that challenge. And then my thought was that we can tell the story with all the richness of everything else that's involved, that we don't have to have all of the literal, you know, houses. And even there's a point where they walk in and out of the tailor shop or the house, and they normally would kiss the mezuzah. And we don't have a doorway. But I insisted that they needed to be kissing the mezuzah, because that at least told us where we were and who we were. And so, you know, there are those aspects of it, and as I said, it was a challenge to me, but to also hear the richness of the language and knowing this show without even having to look at the transliteration, even though I did, because there are little changes here and there that do surprise you. You know, you could just feel it, the rhythm. You could feel the rhythm and the inflection of what the actors were conveying. And so we had our village that way.
If you haven't seen the show, I'm not breaking any new ground here, but suffice it to say, there's a lot of miming of kissing mezuzah. a lot. It's like, and then eventually, oh, that's what they're doing. I got it. Okay. Was there one particular scene or song that created the greatest challenge for you?
I have one.
Good.
The dream sequence.
Oh, do you want to talk about that?
Sure, I'll talk about it. Joel had an idea of a shadow, a screen, and he kind of presented it to me at a production meeting, and I was like, whoa, this is something new. This is something I never had done, and so I started wrapping my mind around it and embracing it. And then there were a lot of people that were saying, oh, it can't happen, it's going to be a production nightmare, and all that. And I started figuring out how it could work, and how and those of you that haven't seen it yet, I won't give it away, but it's just a unique telling of the dream, and I love it, and it's, I'm actually really pleased with it. But it was a challenge.
So you've all been around this, you've been around Yiddish forever. You've been around, or Fiddler has been on your radar for a long time. Same for you. You're in the production now. It's going great. Is there something in particular that you've learned about the show that is new to you, that you hadn't thought of in all the prior experiences, and all the prior productions, and all the thinking about it, that perhaps during the course of the rehearsals or during the course of the shows, all of a sudden something dawns on you about the show that you haven't thought before?
I'm going to jump in quickly. I'm humbled every night to conduct this score. It is one of the most beautifully constructed scores that I've ever had the privilege to work on. Having heard it for so many years, and unfortunately heard it, in dentists' offices as well as elevators, you forget the genius of Jerry Bach and Sheldon Harnick in bringing to life emotions through their music, through their musicality of the text. And so for me, each night, I never tire of the experience of hearing this score in the Yiddish through the incredibly wonderful talent of the actors transmitted. So even though I'm back there with my back to the audience, I'm feeling what the audience is feeling by hearing the intensity of that. So for me, it's each performance is a new revelation for me.
For me, it's rediscovering this world lost in time. It's always been there for me, but now to see it and hear it in Yiddish, to also see without the trappings of huge production elements, to really see the natural and honest, raw and authentic world through the people that are on stage. So through every gesture, facial expression, and movement, they tell the story without having all that. And someone had commented to me that they didn't even notice that there wasn't any scenery because they were there. They were just there in the moment and with the people.
That's true. We're going to take some questions from the audience. I believe we have a microphone. So,
I wanted to know, did the non-Yiddish-speaking actors, did they learn their lines phonetically, or what was the method that was used for them to be able to speak with the right accent, et cetera, and to understand?
Give it to Muscle.
Yeah, I was going to let Muttel answer the question, because Muttel was really essential and key to helping prepare the actors.
So what we did to prepare the actors, first of all, Sabina Bruckner, who was on our team, prepared transliteration. The script as we received it from the Israeli production was written in the Hebrew alphabet, as Yiddish properly is, and she prepared a transliteration into the Latin alphabet that the actors could work with using a standardized system. And so we prepared recordings for them to work with from probably about 6 weeks before the first rehearsal, and then with some of the actors, especially Tevye, Golda, Yenta, we started coaching them one-on-one about 4 weeks before before the rehearsal started. Now, the way that the script worked that we gave them, it had one line of transliterated Yiddish. Underneath that was a word-for-word translation in English, and then underneath that was the original words of Sheldon Harnick and Joseph Stein. So they were working so they could connect the words as well as the overall thoughts. And we were blessed with just a wonderful group of people, besides the fluent Yiddish speakers in the cast, with people who could really pick up the sound of it and could really
And that's
make it
how they got
authentic.
the part, too.
Yeah.
You know, there were a lot of people who were wonderful actors and did not have a propensity or an ability to really make the Yiddish sound right.
We basically gave people a chance, you know, we first heard them based on what they could do with the recording in terms of the first auditions, and then after we saw what they could do with 24 hours of preparation, we said, well, let's see what they do with 36 hours or the next time. And then we made a determination whether we thought in 4 weeks we could get it to the place where it would be natural for them.
Yiddish to me is the language that my grandfather and my mother spoke. And I wish I maintained and held on to a little more of it than I currently do. I understand more than a few words, but it was great having the transliteration. Let's jump forward 20 years from now to the next generation. Yiddish is a living language, but it's not as living as it was in my parents' and my grandparents' generation. Will there be a future for a Yiddish Fiddler on the Roof?
Will there be a future for Carmen in French? Will there be a future for Traviata in Italian? When you have a classic like Fiddler, Fiddler will outlive us all, right? But I can't say if a Yiddish Fiddler will outlive us all, but I have the experience that we have performing this piece every night for an audience that is vociferous and open with their emotional feedback. That is a rare experience in life when you perform something and you get that kind of feedback. I don't get it as much as the actors get it. I feel it. But those are the things in life that I hope will stay with us for a very long time. So when you ask about 20 years from now, who knows? You know, who knows? I go back to the quality of the talent on the stage. When the performers are so honest and real, you are experiencing something, and I believe that you are transformed. So I think it's people are wanting to see that.
I apologize, we could be here all night for all of your questions. Let's take one last question.
What's next for this Fiddler? To Broadway?
It's going to happen. Going back to the very beginning, the fact that I never spoke Yiddish, never really understood it quite, and when I was 15, my father did a show, a Yiddish American show, and I didn't know any Yiddish, so he wrote me a song. And is it okay? And this was.
Is it okay if Joel Gray sings? Go ahead, sure.
When I was 8 days old, they named me Yossel. Oh, what a simcha, such a celebration. All my mishpacha drank a toast, l'chaim. while I was suffering a minor operation. And later on I went to kindergarten. I said, "Teacher, Yossel is my name." She said, "The name of Yossel, it sounds like a shlomossel." From Yossel, my name became Joel Gray.
You three gentlemen and your vast team have really created something special, and for that we all say thank you.